Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our May 8th APCD Planning and Policy Committee meeting. I would like to ask the clerk to call this meeting to order by calling the roll, please.
Thank you, Chair Burkbeck Garcia. Before I call the roll, I would like to note for the record that Member Koval is joining us virtually as permitted by the Brown Act under just cause due to physical disability. Member Koval, can you please confirm that there is no one present in the room with you that is 18 years of age or older?
Confirmed.
Thank you. All remaining committee members are participating in person. With that, Member Duncan, Member Campbell, Member Stigler Granados. I'm sorry, Member Fitzgerald, not member. Vice Chair Koval,
Here.
Chair Burkbeck Garcia.
Here.
Thank you. We'll now move to non-agenda public communication. This is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to the committee on any subject matter within the committee's jurisdiction, but not an item on today's agenda. We have not received any requests to speak under non-agenda public communication.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So let us move to agenda item C then, approval of the December 12th statement of proceedings. Madam Clerk, are there any members of the public that wish to address this committee on the subject?
We've received no request to speak on this item.
Would any of my, well, I guess we're all, except for me, new. But I guess I still have to ask that question. Any comments from our colleagues on the December meeting? Can we call for a motion even though there's only one person that was here at this meeting? Okay, can we call for a motion for approval of the statement of proceedings for the December meeting?
Is there a motion on? If you'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes, you can. Okay,
Perfect.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. With Member Duncan absent, that motion passes with those committee members who are present voting aye.
Great. Now we're going to move to agenda item D, the Planning and Policy Committee calendar and future agenda topics. Madam Clerk, do you mind providing public testimony instructions on this item?
Thank you, Chair Burkbeck Garcia. I would note that requests to speak are no longer accepted for this item. At this time, all public testimony will be heard, or any public testimony would be heard at the conclusion of any staff comments that we have.
Thank you. Paula, are you going to speak on this
topic?
Sure.
I'll give a couple quick comments as an overview. So this item was placed on the agenda to remind the committee of the general scope of the committee's mandate under the administrative code. Generally, the committee is tasked with the strategic planning process, and so we'll be talking about that today, as well as development and updates related to the legislative program. And when the committee was established, the governing board also delegated to the committee the ability to take policy positions on legislation at times, prior to the governing board being able to consider them, as long as it was reported back to the governing board. So we wanted to place this item on the agenda so that the committee could discuss any future agenda topics and also set its calendar for the remainder of this calendar year. We proposed some dates here, as you'll see in your packet, generally alternating with the governing board dates on the second Thursday of the month. But the committee can decide when it would like to meet and what the frequency of those meetings should be. And just to give you a quick overview of prior agendas and topics that we've discussed in this committee, since most of the committee members are new. We've talked about, obviously, our strategic plan that's in development. We've talked about revisions to our administrative code that have been brought forth, our CEQA guidelines that were developed were brought here before going to the full governing board for approval, as well as our legislative program. There have been other updates and topics that have come before the committee, but those are generally, just examples of things that the committee's considered in the past. And looking forward for this year, certainly staff would like the committee to continue getting the strategic plan finished, as well as consideration of the legislative program as we have on the agenda today. And with that, I don't know if the chair has any additional comments, but that concludes my comments.
Thank you, Paula. I think that sums up the overview that we had discussed about the Planning and Policy Committee, and just getting back to what the original plan was for this subcommittee, to why we were meeting, and making sure that we were going back to the roots of it all. I wanted to know if we had any public comments on this agenda item.
Thank you, Chair Birkbeck Garcia. No, we received no public comment or no request to speak on this item.
Do any of the members have any questions about what Paula mentioned?
Good afternoon, John Duncan. So I came in a couple moments late. So are we actually handling agenda item?
D1,
So we are handling D1 and there's no motion in regard to this matter yet?
not yet.
Okay. Okay. So no more further comments on D1 for me. Thank you.
Great. If there's no further questions, could I ask for a motion to approve this agenda item, please?
Motion to approve.
Before I'll go ahead and leave the motion on the floor to approve, but just to clarify, this would be for the adoption of the calendar, the 2025 calendar that is, I believe it's attachment
It's attachments. D1.
Attachment A for item D1, which would basically be every other month, or every month that the governing board is not meeting that second Thursday of the month. Actually, I believe I have it here. So
Yeah, if I'm looking at it properly, it looks like
I have
there's
a
just
screen for you if you need it.
3 more meetings this year.
Yes, July 10th, September 11th, and November 13th.
So I'll be happy to second the motion.
Okay. So there is a motion on the floor by Member Koval, seconded by Member Duncan.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you.
Thank you. That motion passes with all committee members who are present voting aye.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We're moving through this quickly. I would like to now bring up agenda item D2, the 2025 legislative program update. Madam Clerk, do you mind providing public testimony instructions?
Thank you, Chair Birkbeck Garcia. Requests to speak on this item are no longer accepted at this time. Any public comment will be heard at the conclusion of the staff presentation.
Great. You want to go ahead?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Birkbeck Garcia and committee members. This is a mid-year update for our 2025 legislative program. And as you'll recall, the governing board adopted the 2025 legislative program at the February board meeting. The program was included in your packets. It identified 5 legislative priorities, as well as a series of guidelines organized by topic for staff to use when considering comments to proposed legislation. Next slide, please. Since the program was adopted, we've been working with our partner agencies and the California Air Pollution Control Officers Association, or CAPCOA, to identify proposed state legislation related to the adopted priorities and guidelines. The priority legislation listed here was identified based upon its potential impact to SDAPCD programs and activities. I'll next provide a high-level overview of these proposed bills. Next slide, please. First, AB 652 would make minor modifications to the legislation which established a separate governance structure for the district and made us independent from the County of San Diego. That was AB 423, which was proposed by then Assemblymember Gloria in 2019. So for AB 652, Assemblymember David Alvarez proposed the legislation, and we've been closely collaborating with his office on the proposed amendments. And I believe his staff is joining us here today remotely to answer any questions. Generally, AB 652 would allow for alternates to be appointed to the governing board in the same way that the sitting members are appointed by the same appointing authority and in the same manner. They would meet the same qualifications. Next, AB 652 would establish tie vote procedures for the city selection committee process, and it would allow for a weighted vote based on population within the supervisorial district from which those appointments are made. Next, the legislation would propose staggered term limits for new governing board members. This would apply only in 2029 and would apply to 4 seats, those for supervisorial districts 4 and 5, and those for the environmental justice and technical members. And the intent behind this suggestion was so that we would have continuity in our board members' terms by staggering terms for this one for the appointments occurring in that 1 year. Next slide, please. Next, this would allow for any governing board member to be appointed to serve on the California Air Resources Board as the San Diego representative to that board. And it would also allow any governing board member to be appointed as the military liaison. AB 423 put in place a requirement that we have a military liaison serve as a conduit between staff and the military if needed. Right now, Supervisor Tara Lawson-Remer is serving in that capacity. This would remove the requirement that those appointments be limited to the County of San Diego representatives and would allow any board member to be appointed into those positions. And then finally, the legislation would clarify that appointments from the city selection committee, those appointees could be a mayor or a council member. Currently, AB 423 uses the language council member, and understanding that in many of the smaller cities, mayors operate as council members, we still thought it best to clarify that so that there's no question that a mayor could also serve in that capacity. So currently, AB 652 is in the Senate Environmental Quality and dual referred to the Local Government Committee. It has passed the Assembly with a high level of support. There was a letter in your packet expressing some concerns related to a couple of pieces of it, but generally there's been widespread support for the legislation. And like I say, we have put in a letter of support and worked very closely with Assemblymember Alvarez's office in crafting the legislation. Also noted here, we do reference back to the legislative priority that identified this in the legislative program. So legislative priority 5 provided that there would be potential for cleanup legislation this year for AB 423 to address some of these issues, and also related to policy guidelines, environmental justice number 2. Next slide, please. So next we have AB 14, and this is called the Protecting Blue Whales and Blue Skies Program. This bill would expand an existing vessel speed reduction program and make it available statewide. Locally, the Port of San Diego has a similar voluntary vessel speed reduction program. In the future, they could decide whether to participate in this statewide program. Generally, what it does is it provides incentives for vessel operators to slow their speeds. And it produces huge emission reductions as a result, and a co-benefit of reducing whale strikes, hence the name Protecting Blue Whales and Blue Skies. This legislation also has very widespread support. It has passed the Assembly on a 76-0 vote and is currently in the Senate Rules Committee. This is also consistent with our legislative priority number 2, and it's been a part of our legislative program for, I think, the last couple of years. Next slide, please. So this next bill, AB 1106, would establish regional air quality incident response programs throughout the state. And this idea for this legislation grew out of the LA wildfires and the extensive need for monitoring resources that come up when there is an air quality incident. As many of you may recall, last summer we had 3 incidents going on at once. We had the Tijuana River extremely elevated odors. We had a battery storage facility fire up in Escondido and a mystery odor off the coast of Oceanside and Encinitas. And it was very challenging for a district like ours to be able to respond, and in fact, for any district to be able to respond with resources to be able to provide information to the public under those circumstances. So this legislation would establish regional monitoring response centers. For us, the likely center would be out of our sister agency to the north, the South Coast Air Quality Management District. They were able to respond under short fashion when we asked them for assistance monitoring the odors in the Tijuana River Valley area. If this were to pass and the resources were to come to them, we could enter into a mutual aid agreement, which would allow us to take advantage of the significant resources that they have. Again, this is consistent with our legislative priority number 4, which is to enhance incident response capacity and strengthen our air quality monitoring efforts. Currently, this is in the Assembly Appropriations Committee. It was referred to the suspense file. As you might imagine, there are significant costs that are associated with these types of programs. So the legislation that has significant costs associated with it typically ends up in the suspense file before it can be voted out of that committee. So we've put in letters of support on it and we'll continue to support it as we can. Next slide, please. So SB 34, we have taken an opposed position on. This legislation would prohibit the South Coast Air Quality Management District, again, our sister agency to the north, from adopting a rule related to indirect source regulation of the ports of LA and Long Beach. And so the reason for our opposed position on this relates to a couple of our guidelines, which relate to the ability of local air districts to retain their authority to regulate stationary sources of emissions. And this would undermine that local regulatory power by having the legislature step in to prohibit adoption of a ISR regulation for ports in that area for a period of, I believe it's over 10 years. So this is in Senate Appropriations set to be heard on May 12th, 2025. Next slide, please. So the next piece of legislation is SB 318. This one would expand authority for the California Air Resources Board over very large sources of what are referred to as Title V sources. These are the largest stationary sources that we regulate. And so typically these for us are facilities such as power plants, landfills, things like that. It would amend the definitions of best available control technology and best available retrofit control technology and greatly expand those definitions. And the estimated cost is approximately $12 million annually for staffing at CARB. The legislation would also require that we train CARB in the permitting of these types of sources because currently CARB does not have authority under Title V to regulate these, to issue permits for these facilities. So that authority, because these are federal operating permits, that authority is delegated to us straight from federal EPA. There is no CARB role at this time in the permitting of those facilities. And again, it gets back to this general structure of how air districts are empowered to be the primary regulatory authority for stationary sources. Again, that's why we've taken an opposed position on this, similar to SB 34. because it would take away the authority of local air districts to regulate stationary sources in their jurisdiction. Currently, this is in Senate Appropriations on the suspense file. Next slide, please. And then lastly, this is a provision that we've taken a watch position on. This relates to, again, indirect source regulation. And AB 914 would give the California Air Resources Board the authority to regulate indirect sources of air pollution. Indirect sources are those sources that may not, in and of themselves, generate high levels of pollution, but attract mobile sources such as trucks or other forms of traffic or mobile sources that do cause pollution. And so several local air districts have adopted indirect source rules. This committee and our governing board have considered whether to do something similar locally. That issue will be coming back to the governing board this late summer or fall. But in the meantime, there is this legislation moving through the legislature that would give CARB that authority. It would require them to consult with local air districts, and it would allow them to recover fees for the costs of the program, and require that they give priority to the largest sources of pollution on a regional scale, as well as those that are having the largest impacts on a localized basis. So this one is also in Assembly Appropriations Committee. It's also on the suspense file. We are watching it closely. There are many districts throughout the state that are extremely concerned about this, given their own existing ISR programs. But there's also thought that there could be some value in having CARB regulate this, since they have primary authority over mobile sources. So we are continuing to watch this, and we'll continue to monitor it closely. Next slide, please. So that concludes my presentation. That's the update of the activities that we've been taking on since the board adopted the program. I'm happy to hear your comments and answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Madam Clerk, are there any public comments on this agenda item?
Thank you, Chair Birkbeck Garcia. We have received no requests for public testimony under this item.
Thank you. Do any members of the committee have any comments?
Excuse me, I have some questions for staff and some comments. So and maybe we can go through them in order, since we had a multitude, and I held my questions on each bill as they were shown. Can we show the bills back, the first one that we talked about? So taking a look at this bill and the staff's report, I'm taking a look, for instance, where it says establish tie vote procedures for city selection committee, weighted vote within supervisory district. And then you referenced the part in our packet that sets forth the legislative priorities. So where in our prior legislative priorities, or whatever that was approved in February, is there anything about that, or the weighted vote being something that the board supports?
So in the legislative priorities, we do specify that we could seek legislation to clarify portions of AB 423 that relate to the city selection committee process, the appointment process. So it's a general statement there that we could look
Right.
at.
So
that.
there's never been a discussion at the governing board level or at the policy level where the members have said, we want to pursue a weighted vote in legislation to limit the power of smaller cities to choose who their representative is from their supervisory district, right?
So there hasn't been a specific discussion of that, but AB 423 itself was designed to diversify the representation on the governing board. And so the thinking was that the intent was that those appointments would be specified at the supervisor district level. So
Well, I mean, I know
meaning the
what it
city,
says, and I know
yeah,
how they're
the
chosen,
city's
so
involved.
I'm not sure what you're saying. I'm not following why the staff would believe it's appropriate to support and work with an assembly member to have weighted voting when there's nothing about that in the actual bill or the rules that currently exist. And there's never been a discussion by this board members to do such a thing. And I mean, to say it comes from intent about diversification, I mean, we already have the procedure where it comes from each supervisory district. So I'm kind
Right.
of shocked by it. I mean, I come from Sandag, and years on there where we started off 3 years ago for me on Sandag, where the weighted vote was being called regularly and it was extraordinarily poisonous. And there was huge outcry over it to such an extent that it hasn't been called in almost 3 years now, at least 2 solid years. No one's called it except in the statutory required areas where you have to do both the weighted and the non-weighted vote. There's never been invoked in 2 years because it's so despised by the vast majority, and by the vast majority, I mean probably 13 or 14 cities in the county. So again, that's the origin of my question. It seems that I certainly understand you work with the assembly member on his bill, but this doesn't seem to me to be the bill of anything that this agency, other than staff, has ever decided they'd like to pursue.
Well, again, it was, and I appreciate your comments. If the committee thinks it's appropriate, we could bring it to the full board for a vote. But I think staff was under the impression that, the intent was to have the appointment of the members come from within those districts as opposed to coming from the county as a whole. And so if that's not the governing board will, then certainly we can express that opinion to Member Alvarez. But I would want that to go to the full governing board for them to be able to weigh in.
I'm actually not sure I'm following what you're just proposed. I mean, if this policy group is charged with voting on these things, if there's one that, so if we vote against this today, then you're saying you want it to go to the full board, but if we vote for it, it doesn't go to the full board? Is that what you're proposing?
So what we proposed, we saw as being consistent with both the legislative program and AB 423 and the intent of AB 423. If certainly this committee can vote to say that it disagrees with that. And then certainly we can also ask for a full governing board opinion on that as well.
I mean, if that's the policy, I think we should ask for a full governing board vote on every single item that we approve and disapprove. It shouldn't be that we just cherry pick one item and say that item goes to the board. That seems very strange to me. I'm not really following what you're proposing. It seems procedurally putting the finger on certain items versus other items. I mean, otherwise, I'm not even sure why we're doing this. We just don't do everything at the board. So if we vote something down, that means it's going to go to the board, but if we vote yes, it doesn't.
No, not necessarily. I mean, the committee could decide to refer it to the governing board. The chair on his own motion could refer it to the governing board.
So,
And this was not intended to be a frequent happening, right? I think we saw it come up once in the latest round of appointments. This would only come up in the event of a tie vote for the appointment process itself. So it's not intended to be it doesn't give, for example, the city of San Diego veto power over all the appointments. It only comes up in the case of a tie, and it only includes the population that's within that supervisorial district as part of the weighting formula.
So, and how many of the 5 districts is San Diego the majority population entity?
Let me look. I have it here.
Why you're looking if it's okay? Because I understand what you're saying. I mean, obviously I was part of that. We ended up not using the tiebreaker procedure. So I guess my point would be that it's never happened and it won't happen theoretically. I mean, it could if members are missing the CSC meeting, but most of them don't have an even number, right? They have an odd number, so there shouldn't be a tie.
Correct. Well,
So it looks like
if I'm looking at the correct data, there are 4 districts with even numbers of cities, and the city of San Diego would have a majority in 2, but not like a supermajority, not, I believe only in, we'd have to look at the numbers and see.
Are they
It-
part of those other districts? Is the city of San Diego in those other districts?
Yes,
Okay, so they're in all the supervisory districts?
they're in districts 1, 2, and 3. They're also in District 4, but there's an odd number of cities in that district.
Okay, so,
So we're talking about 1, 2, and 3 that the city's in. They're not in District 5.
okay. So
And-
even including the districts where there's an odd number, I mean, somebody could be missing, like there was Carlsbad in my district at the last meeting, and there could be a tie. Well, or if in one of those evens, they could have, or they could have two people missing. I mean, the odd number one, they could have one person missing, therefore it would be a tie and the same formula would be used. So in that district where there's an odd number, are they the majority in that city as well?
I believe so. That's District 4, and I think I don't have it here, but it's
Okay. Alrighty.
San Diego, Lemon Grove.
Well, I appreciate you answering my question. I'm not going to just keep belaboring on my issues with it, but for me, I agree with the concept of trying to keep the vote within the supervisory district, but I don't agree with the weighted vote in that district. If there's a tie, I can understand not wanting to have the procedure that was put forth with the whole CSC voting to break the tie. But I mean, I can't vote for a weighted vote in my district to break the tie. So whether that means the committee, the supervisory district just has to work it out, which it would have been worked out in that one in our district. It was worked out. I mean, Carlsbad didn't come, but it would have worked out, and it worked out because they didn't come as well. But either way, it was going to be worked out at that meeting. I'm not sure if everybody knew that, but that's the facts. So in any event, so that's just where I am on this bill. Sorry to talk so long.
No,
That's-
please
Thank-
don't apologize because this is very informative also. So I'm not in politics, and so getting some of this background is very helpful as well. So I appreciate that. I believe.
And this is the only bill that I have a few questions or comments about. If it's okay if I speak.
Yes, please do.
Okay. So I agree with Mayor Duncan's perspective on the weighted vote in Sandag, and it has been, I've seen it used and abused. And so my concerns too were about the weighted vote, but I also understand, you know, I don't know what happened. I was there when there was the tie. And so Mayor, I don't know what happened to ultimately break the tie.
I can
But
answer briefly with permission, Chair. So what happened is it ended up that it was not a tie on the 2-week reconvened meeting because
Oh.
Carlsbad was absent. So it was a 3-2 vote for me for the position.
okay,
So
so
that-
then, and then also this is already, it seems like the bus has already left on this one. It's already been voted through the assembly and now it's on the Senate, and it seems like it's already selling kind of through. So I don't know whether if we say we support or don't support, if it's going to matter, honestly. But what I'm really concerned about, and I'm glad that members from Assemblymember Alvarez's office are on the call or somewhere, is that I also agree that we need alternates. We have alternates on Sandag. There's a lot of information and you want to make sure the business gets done. But when appointing alternates, say in the case of a tie, whoever isn't, wins, I guess, in the tiebreaker, I think that the person that the rest of the people wanted should automatically be the alternate. Because then the weighted vote could just be abused in that way. I'm just looking in the future of how things can be abused by politicians. So that's one concern I have. And then also, is there a process for alternates? And did it define breaking ties for alternates? I've been in these meetings where we select the primaries and the alternates, and even at the alternate level, it can get dicey. So just wondering if that's been thought through.
I think the way it's currently drafted in answer to your question, Member Koval, is that the same process would apply for appointment of an alternate as appointment of the primary member. So the same, if the legislation goes through, the same tie-breaking procedure would also apply, the way it's currently written.
Okay, I would like to recommend then that in the case of the tie on the primary, that the alternate is automatically the person that, was tied in the primary.
Is there anyone from Assemblymember Alvarez? You said there was people from Assemblymember Alvarez's team here or on the call?
I believe they're participating remotely, and they're available to answer questions.
I don't know if any of them would like to comment on the concerns that Member Duncan and Member Koval have.
I see somebody
Thank
with,
you.
oh, sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you for your questions. My name is Chris Johnsmeyer, here on behalf of Assemblymember Alvarez. Yeah, for the tiebreaker vote, as Mayor Duncan mentioned, we kind of just copied what SANDAG does, and it is as we understand it, a very rare event, and we just figured let's have a streamlined way of breaking ties and take from something that's already precedent. But if there's concerns, we're happy to have a conversation on that. Happy to look at other ideas. Same with the alternate procedure. We put in the bill that the alternates shall be selected at the same process by the same appointing authority and meet the same qualifications. But if there's changes, we can always have a conversation on that. It is in the Senate now, but that doesn't mean, changes are totally out of, the realm of possibilities. So we could absolutely do additional amendments if there's direction from you or from APCD in general. So thank you. Happy to answer more questions.
Before we move to the next one, this is not, I was just informed by Madam Clerk that this is not something that we need to take a motion on. This is an informational item, but however, if we would like to make a motion, can we make a motion, Heidi and Paula?
So there's
Yes.
no action that's requested, but if
Right.
you'd like to give direction
Correct.
to staff,
So,
yes, then you.
I'd like to ask Member Duncan if he would like to propose a motion, maybe giving direction about the weighted vote within the supervisorial district. I don't want to force your hand on anything, but if that's something you would like to do, this would be an opportunity where we could discuss that.
And I think I appreciate that. And I do overall find it to be somewhat strange that this isn't an action item because it is, appears to me to be, primarily, and many of them are, I'm sure, are fully in compliance with the legislative priorities that were previously approved, but these are staff-generated positions on legal bills, and any entity I've sat on, every single time where they have been generated by staff, often they're always never published without them being approved by the city council or the board or something. But in any event, if we're not to approve them, I would make a proactive motion to not approve support as recommended by the staff on AB 652. And it's not because I'm more than happy to work with Assemblymember Alvarez's office and on any of concerns I have. We've never spoken about this bill. It happened so fast. I know Mayor Gloria said he was going to have Assemblymember Alvarez push this through, but I can't support it. Without getting too much into any more of the details, I don't think it's really the right time because the bill exists, as was pointed out, I think by Ms. Koval, Member Koval, that the bill exists in its current form and just in its form because of the weighted vote aspect. I can't support it. So if we have discussion, if it changes, the bill comes back differently, I'm happy to vote, according to whatever the language is at that time. But without, I don't think it's appropriate to try to do changes to it here when it's in its form going forward, and it may well go forward in its current form. But for me, my motion, just simply after all that rambling, is so again, my motion as a member of this body is to not support AB 652 in its current form.
And I'll second that motion. I agree that we need to really look more at the weighted vote. I didn't realize it was, I don't think it's truly copied from Sandag, but maybe it is. And I've seen the weighted vote, in my opinion, abused at Sandag. It might not be used now, but early on it was used and used a lot for minuscule things. And also, I really think we need to have more thought about the alternates as well. Like I said, if there's a tie and the weighted vote's called, that I think that person should automatically be the alternate if they're ousted by the weighted vote.
So would anyone like to make a motion on this agenda item
There's a motion and a second on the floor.
on the floor?
Mhm.
Okay. Do you mind repeating the motion for me?
There is a motion by member Duncan, seconded by member Koval to not support AB 652 in its current form.
Any other comments on this?
See, is it on? Yes, just in listening to this and then just reading a little bit more, I'm also concerned about this because basically I represent one of the smaller municipalities, and if it came to this, it would just undermine, as far as the representation, and it would not be equitable. It would just really shut down the voice of the smaller municipalities. So basically, we wouldn't have a say.
Paula?
Could I make a clarification, Chair?
Sure.
So again, just to reiterate, this would come up in the case of a tie vote at the city selection committee. So for example, in District 5, there's 4 cities. Escondido has approximately 150,000 population. Oceanside's a little bit bigger, but the other cities are smaller. And so in that kind of a situation, the population would be weighted according only to the cities within that district. So City of San Diego is not included in that. I just wanted to clarify. So it only comes up in the event of a tie vote. The largest city can't call for a weighted vote. It is different from how Sandag operates the weighted vote process.
Yeah, I'm still not comfortable with it, as I understand it.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second, it sounds like here. I just wanted to get some clarification from Paula. If we vote on this motion to not proceed forward, Member Duncan, sorry, I need to use same terms for everybody. Member Duncan did have a point during one of these things where he did state that he had a question, and I just want clarification on that question. If we choose not to support this, you had mentioned bringing it up to the governing board, but then some of the other ones, if we did support, we wouldn't bring to the governing board. So I kind of want to just get a little clarification from that
So I may have
statement.
Sure, let me clarify. So the committee could recommend the governing board to take a look at it. It's reflected conceptually in the legislative program that the governing board adopted. But Member Duncan's absolutely correct that that weighted vote is not spelled out, and the full governing board did not discuss that concept specifically. So if the committee wanted the full governing board to weigh in on that to clarify the legislative program, they could certainly request that. But I don't believe that it's required, at least, and I'm looking at council and the clerk, at least that would, so just to clarify what I said earlier.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So we have a motion and a second right now. We'll go ahead and take a vote on this. Everyone in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any objections? And then I'm going to abstain because I am not knowledgeable enough on this, but the ayes do definitely have a majority here.
I also abstained as well.
With members Birkbeck Garcia and Stigler Granados abstaining, that motion passes with those board members who are present voting aye.
Thank you, and I appreciate this discussion here. Member Duncan, did you want to go over the next assembly bill? I have them all written.
Thank you. I don't have any comments on AB 14. I don't know if any of the other members do.
Does any member have any comments on AB 14? I can't see Member Koval, so if you
No.
don't mind helping. Clerk.
I don't.
Thank you. Sorry, any comments? Did you want them to go through each one or did you have one in mind?
What might be most expeditious if the board's open to it is go through them one at a time just quickly. And if we end up with none, we can take them all as a group. Or if there's one that gets broke off, we could approve the rest. Or if we don't need a motion, I guess we don't need to.
We don't, yeah, we can just go through and see. That sounds great to me.
Thank you.
Any comments on AB 1106?
Not from me.
Great, next. SB 34?
No.
No.
Sorry, Member Koval. Oh, I can see you now. Oh, it's going to go back and forth.
Okay. I'm a no on this one.
SB 318?
Sure.
Member Duncan?
Thank you. I just was wondering, maybe the staff can elaborate for me a little bit on it. I am obviously, as you can tell from the first item we talked about, for local control. I have some concerns just about if I'm reading this right, or maybe if it's another one, but so it's what you were saying is you think it's better, or you believe that the board overall has legislative priority or believes it's better to keep certain decisions with the local air quality control districts as opposed to CARB, which, is it fair to say, is the state air board, correct?
Yes.
It's another, just using that term in that way, colloquially, the state board. And is there, I don't want to waste your time, but if there's just a short explanation maybe of why that is
Absolutely.
the case.
Sure. So in state law and historically, local air districts grew out of county public health departments and were established in 1955. So we are now coming up on our 70-year anniversary. So we predate the Federal Clean Air Act. And so in state law, longstanding state law, local air districts are given primary authority over the regulation of stationary sources of pollution. We work together with the California Air Resources Board, who has primary authority over things like consumer products and mobile sources, under waivers from the federal EPA that has control over mobile sources, plus interstate sources like locomotives, airplanes, things like that. And so our role for the decades that we've been in existence has been to have that primary control over stationary sources. When the Title V federal operating permit program was adopted in the 1990s, that authority to issue those federal operating permits was delegated directly to the local air districts, not to CARB to delegate to the local air districts. So there are some roles that CARB has where they provide oversight to us, such as on planning and rules and our state implementation plan to ensure that we achieve state and federal air quality standards. But they do not have direct authority over permitting of local stationary sources. It would add another layer of regulation to those stationary sources beyond ours. So we would do our review. Then there'd be the potential for CARB to do separate review for these sources before those permits go to get final approval from the federal government. And we've been running the Title V program quite well since the mid-90s. And this legislation would just inject another regulatory agency into that process.
Okay, so you're saying that it wouldn't be instead of the local ones, it would be in addition to.
Correct. That's correct.
And then just my last question, if you happen to know, when it talks about large stationary sources, are there, 50 of those in San Diego? Are there 10 of them? Are there 10,000?
I'm
Like,
looking at my deputy director who knows the
I'm not
exact
trying to
number.
overly put you on the spot. I just
No, that's
trying
good.
to
We're like
edify myself.
35-ish.
Yeah, about 30 Title V.
So 30 Title V sources in San Diego.
All right, I appreciate the information. I don't think I have any other questions on it. I'm not sure, maybe Member Koval said something on this one. I wasn't sure.
I don't have anything on this.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions on that agenda item? Nope. Okay. And then AB 914.
Is this the same situation where it would be, if we have these, if you could tell me if it's where CARB would be an added layer or an instead of layer, or instead of us?
In this case, it would be, it's hard to tell from this legislation at this point because it's kind of early in the process. I think the thinking is it would be an instead of, not a in addition to. And so, conceptually, so for example, the California Air Pollution Control Officers Association, CAPCOA, when we discussed this as districts from around the state, talked about the concept of an opt-out provision, perhaps, where a local district could vote to say, nope, we don't want to be part of that statewide program, or covered by that regulation, we're going to do our own, or we just don't think it's necessary for emission reductions in our district. And so that concept is not currently in the legislation. There is a requirement that they consult with the local air districts and work with them, but it's not a specific, at this point, it's not written as a specific opt-out provision. So I think the intent would be that it would be an instead of, not in addition to, but again, that's not very well specified in the legislation right now.
I appreciate your comments, and fair enough as well, because as you say, it's monitoring closely, so maybe we'll see how it develops. So I appreciate that. I don't have any further questions on it. Thank you, Chair.
Any other member with any further questions on this agenda item?
Not me.
So we will proceed on our agenda to action item or review item D3, review of working draft of the SDAPCD strategic plan. Madam Clerk, do you mind providing public testimony instructions?
Thank you, Chair Birkbeck Garcia. At this time, request to speak are no longer accepted for this item. Any public testimony will be heard at the conclusion of the staff presentation.
Paula, sorry.
That's me. All right, thank you, Chair Birkbeck Garcia and Planning Committee members. This item is an overview and update of the district's long-term strategic planning development process. The proposed plan is a blueprint for how we will improve air quality, protect public health, and ensure clean air for all San Diegans over the next several years. We started this process in late 2022 and developed the draft plan after considerable stakeholder engagement, internal collaboration, and a rigorous assessment of both the challenges we face and the opportunities ahead. Next slide, please. So during today's presentation, I will provide an overview of how this plan was developed, the structure of the proposed plan, a high-level description of the proposed strategies and next steps. And recognizing that most of you are new to the board and have not had previous opportunities to review the plan, I will say that this is an opportunity for your initial review. Today's update is intended to provide that opportunity and allow for just a high-level overview, your initial review. There will be many more opportunities to discuss it. Next slide, please. So at the core of this strategic plan is our vision of clean air for all and our mission to improve air quality to protect public health and the environment. Everything in this plan is designed to move us closer to that future. Improving air quality through fair, effective, and science-based programs served as our compass throughout the planning process. Next slide, please. And so to accomplish our mission, we needed to identify goals to direct our work. After we split out from the County of San Diego, we developed the goals reflected here on this slide, and they were approved by the governing board back in 2022. They were developed based on our legal mandates, including new requirements established in AB 423 when the district separated from the county, as well as board policy direction. These goals represent the broad, long-term outcomes we're working towards. As you'll see later in the presentation, every strategy in this plan was developed to help achieve progress in these critical areas. The 5 goals form the strategic backbone of the plan. They translate our vision and mission into practical, achievable focus areas. Next slide, please. So as we developed the strategic plan, we took a comprehensive look at the full range of programs and services we provide. This slide shows a schematic of how our different programs fit into each other and that are essential to achieving our mission. Our work begins with our Monitoring and Technical Services Division, which monitors and reports air quality conditions across the region. This air monitoring network is vital for tracking our progress towards clean air goals and assessing pollutant exposure throughout the region. Next, our planning team develops plans to attain and maintain federal and state clean air standards. Then the rule development team creates regulations to implement these plans, targeting emission reductions from stationary sources. Next, our engineering team evaluates permit applications for industrial and other stationary pollution sources, setting conditions to ensure compliance. Permits cover a wide range of facilities, from large industrial operations like factories and power plants to smaller establishments such as gas stations and dry cleaners, as well as various government facilities operating boilers, emergency backup engines, and other regulated equipment. Next, our compliance team conducts field inspections to verify adherence to permit conditions and air quality regulations. Beyond these core programs, we have overarching programs that support the entire agency, including grants and incentives, support services, administrative functions, environmental justice, and legal counsel. We asked, how can each program evolve to better support our long-term goals? Ultimately, this plan ensures that our day-to-day work is tightly aligned with our long-term direction. Next slide, please. This slide conveys the extensive outreach conducted to ensure the strategic plan reflects the needs and priorities of the communities we serve. We engaged a broad range of stakeholders, including residents, regulated entities, environmental justice advocates, and agency partners through surveys, public workshops, and direct meetings. Their input was instrumental in shaping the plan's goals, strategies, and focus areas. A very similar version of this plan was also presented to the previous Planning and Policy Committee members in August of 2024. Since then, it's been refined and reorganized to make it more readable for the public. Next slide, please. This slide provides the overall structure of the plan. The structure was designed with clarity in mind, grouping strategies under each of the district's 5 overarching goals with concise descriptions and measurable objectives to ensure transparency, alignment, and ease of understanding for both internal and public audiences. The plan is designed to be a standalone document that describes the existing district programs and identifies our new strategic actions, but it also contains several appendices for members of the public who would like to delve deeper into our existing plans, as well as the more detailed timelines for our objectives and actions. Next slide, please. The proposed plan includes a 5-year vision statement, as shown in this slide, to represent what success will look like when we fulfill our mission and achieve our strategic goals. They are forward-looking, measurable, and grounded in the district's core responsibilities. These statements reflect our commitment to attaining air quality standards, reducing health risks, advancing environmental justice, improving transparency, strengthening partnerships, and expanding monitoring capabilities. Collectively, they paint a clear picture of healthier, more equitable, and better connected region that we are working to create. Next slide, please. The strategies outlined in this plan are designed to advance our mission and help achieve our vision of clean air for all. Each strategy aligns with one of the district's overarching goals and is linked to measurable actions which describe how we will pursue the strategy. More information in terms of the proposed timelines and metrics to measure success can be found in Appendix D for each of these actions. And so, for example, under air quality, we have here proposed strategies to reduce air contaminants and demonstrate attainment with federal and state standards, one of our guiding principles. Under public health, evaluating complaint trends from our complaint 24/7 complaint program to improve air quality and public health. An example under environmental justice and equity is fostering increased regional collaboration. And let's see, next slide, please. So here, under public engagement and transparency, their strategies are designed to expand our visibility and communication throughout San Diego County. And under operational excellence, these are strategies that relate to increasing the quality of our work and optimizing operational efficiency. As we develop the strategies and actions, we are also mindful of our limitations as an agency. We considered what we refer to in the plan as the 4 C's, which are our capabilities, meaning do we have the skills and knowledge to carry out these programs? Our capacity, do we have the resources and people power? Our culture, do we have a team culture that supports those actions? And our constraints, are there other limitations that could be brought to bear here? All of these factors will be taken into account as we develop specific action plans for the strategies. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, a similar version of this draft plan was presented to the committee last year. Given that we have 5 new board members this year, we wanted to give you a chance for an initial review of the plan before releasing it to the public. I recognize you're just seeing this, and there's a lot to digest here. And so I invite your feedback over the next few days or weeks. I'm happy to have a separate meeting with you about it as well. We're planning to release the draft plan to the public this summer with a goal of bringing it to the full governing board for approval later in the fall of this year. I also want to note that many actions in the plan are already being implemented, and full plan implementation will continue over the course of the next 3 to 5 years. Funding for implementation will be incorporated into our yearly budget proposals, and it will include a mix of existing funding sources and one-time funding opportunities we pursue over the coming years to support the deliverables of the plan. While some strategies will be implemented in the short term, others will have to be phased out over a number of years depending on resource availability. Next slide, please. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Paula. Madam Clerk, were there any members of the public that wanted to address this item?
Thank you, Chair Burkett Garcia. We've received no request for public testimony on this item.
Wow, that's a rarity. Okay. Any of the members have any questions or comments for Paula or staff?
I have a quick question.
Member Koval first, sorry, and then Member Granados.
Thank you. First, I want to say that I'm very impressed that staff did this in-house. I've done a few strategic plans in my time, and it's a lot of heavy lifting to do one. So based on that, I did have a chance, and just so you all know the reason why I'm not there with you is I had my ankle joint replaced. And so I have this laptop on a table on my lap and I'm squirming. So that's why I'm moving around a lot. I don't know what it looks like on the big screen, trying to get comfortable. But anyway, back to the strategic plan. When you talk about your strategies, those are your, in my opinion, the way I read it, are qualitative strategies, basically your ideals. Some of them are tied to legislation that goals you have to meet. But I'm also used to seeing KPIs that are quantitative. And so perhaps we could add some KPIs that are quantitative, and I don't know how your business operates. So these are like examples that have no basis in reality, but they're just examples of the things that I would look for. For instance, with a KPI, quantitative could be related to, under one of those categories, permitting, like issuing, let me look at the next page. So process 95% of the permits within 30 days. Now, I don't know if that's realistic. I'm just saying that's like an example of one. Achieve 100% compliance with NSR Title V emission limits for issued permits. Within compliance and enforcement, inspect 100% of Title V facilities annually. Resolve 90% of violation notices within 60 days. So there's a lot of things like that that I think every department could come up with that could be measured. And that's something that the board could look at when you give an update on the strategic plan. That's my feedback.
Thank you, Member Koval. That's a really great suggestion. I will say one of the struggles that we had was how to reflect all the ongoing work that is already in process. And so you'll see in here that we reference our ongoing programs as kind of an introductory section here, and then get into some of these newer strategic initiatives. We did, for the newer strategic initiatives, we did include metrics of how to measure success, but that was one of the sections that got moved into an appendix in order to kind of allow for more readability of the front of the program. And so if I'm hearing you correctly, you're suggesting also metrics for kind of the ongoing work to ensure that we're doing it in an effective way. Is that,
exactly?
am I getting that right? Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Member Granados.
I think that was similar question, was the metrics and just sort of understanding how they're getting measured, again, like based off of quantifiable numbers. How much does it cost? Is it cost effective? Things like that. So I think Member Koval really expressed that better than I am. But as the academic here thinking out loud, I'm wondering about the timeline for giving you all feedback, and if there's a best way also to get you that feedback. Of course, I'm like, do you have a Word document that I can just track changes in, or do I need to review like a PDF and just provide you my comments if needed?
I think we could certainly provide a Word version of this to you if you'd prefer to give us comments that way. Okay. Yeah. And yes, there are metrics in Appendix D that reference back to all these actions. Most of them are measurable things. So if I, let's see. So for example, if I just look at air quality objective 1, there's a series of actions there, metrics to measure. The objective itself is expanding air quality monitoring in environmental justice communities. One of the metrics is securing funding for 25 sensor-based monitors and staff capacity to maintain the network. And to your point about resources, as we, some of this obviously happens at a high level at the budget, in the budget discussions, but also staff is going to be developing more granular action plans when they're looking at these to ensure that we do have the resources to carry it from start to finish. So that's something that would happen at that kind of granular level in the action plans as well.
Member Duncan, did you want to make a comment?
Thank you. One of my goals is to try to understand when we use terms, like what are we doing like with that term, and when I, and go into some of the supporting docs and try to, fully understand it. And maybe it's not necessarily completely for today, but part of my questions is, like, is there a separate, like, standalone definition, for instance, for like environmental justice, or is it made up of like the supporting, actions? Because and I know this is strategic, plan and everything, but like there's different goals, that are a little bit, I'm just trying to figure out if there's certain definitions, because in one definition, it's like, hey, where there's areas where there's more pollution, right? Where they've suffered more, those communities, we need to make sure we focus on helping those communities that have suffered more, bared more of the burden of environmental, our pollution, air pollution, et cetera. So I'm obviously for that, and the reason I bring it up, where I've had a couple issues in the past at Sandag back with our former chair, Nora Vargas, sometimes was just in getting some of that definition, because my belief is you can take, for instance, probably an area I'd consider like that would be, around the Barrio Logan area, or in some of those, areas where there's a lot going on. But often when we check on the air pollution, and you will know for sure if I'm right, because your data probably, but we're looking at some of it, sometimes Coronado's air is the same or sometimes worse than Barrio Logan, or very similar on the same time. And so I'm just looking, I'm trying to figure out the priorities, what it means, because my goal is clean air, period, clean air. And if it's the air doesn't know like where on the bay, it becomes a different city. So I don't mean to talk too much, but if this is sort of I would like to understand the terms, or what it means maybe to the staff.
Sure. And did you want to take that? Oh, okay. I'm going to ask our Deputy Director, Domingo Vigil, who oversees our Office of Environmental Justice, to respond.
Thank you for that question. So the work that we do for Office of Environmental Justice, and specifically looking at the strategic plan, is largely based on the definition for equity that the board adopted for our agency. And that in itself was also based on EPA's definition or equity statement for how to guide our work to make it equitable for everybody. And it is in our very vision, clean air for all. So where do we engage in different ways to make sure that we're elevating those air quality issues that are being problematic at the different communities? And so, for example, one of the ways, or one of the tools that we use, is existing mapping tools that were developed by EPA, also by OEHA at the state level. And so we look at metrics like, pollution levels, income levels, socioeconomic status, et cetera, to help us guide where is that additional effort needed to make sure that we're elevating those air quality needs.
Just a quick question on that. So I appreciate that. So when you say additional effort, that can mean a few different things, but one of the things I take from here, which I am supportive of, is more engagement and reaching out to those communities. And maybe there's language barriers as well to try to work through, or just access to, working communities and things like that. Is that what you mean mostly?
Absolutely. That's exactly it.
Thank you.
And if I might add to that, if you look at page 19, you'll see links both to the equity statement that Domingo referenced, as well as our environmental justice framework that was adopted by the board. And that'll give you—
That's what I was looking at.
Okay, so that'll give you a really good overview of the direction that the board has given us in terms of integrating environmental justice into our programs, as well as defining issues of equity.
Yeah, and I guess just my last final comment, and I apologize for talking. This is helpful though, because part of it is for us to learn and to bring us up to speed, as you were saying, as new members. Is I'm for all of these sentences that I'm reading, and all of the attachments. I'm advocate and support policies, regulation, all this stuff. So I'm good with all of it. And that's kind of where our former chair at Sandag, she would say, "Well, are you for this?" And I would say, I'd be like this. And she's like, "Well, I want a thumbs up." And I'd be like, "But I don't know what it means," right? So I support. Where it becomes an area of scrutiny is how after that, if it affects spending, not based off of actual air quality being the worse or not, meaning, and I don't think it does, but if it gets to a point where there's a community, whether it's Escondido, and they have a really, really bad reading, but there's another area where it has an issue, it's not as dramatic, but maybe money's going there for a different reason. That's where I would want to comprehend it and analyze it as a board member.
Sure. And I think that's a great point and great discussion to continue to have. I will say that there's quite a bit of the state funding that we receive, for example, for the Office of Environmental Justice, is directed specifically to be spent in the communities as Domingo laid out. And so, however, as a regional air agency, we're responsible for cleaning the air for all communities of the county of San Diego. And so when we're looking, for example, at our regional monitoring network, we're looking at requirements that flow down from EPA to ensure that we have a representative monitoring network for the whole county. Escondido happens to be one of the places we're going to be expanding that network in the coming year, because we do want to ensure that we're seeing the air quality issues in communities throughout the county. We've also tried to expand our engagement efforts in those additional communities. It was funded by an EPA grant that has since been terminated, but we're still trying to continue to the extent we can, looking for additional funding to be able to keep that program going.
I appreciate that. One more comment. Okay. And whenever we're at the governing board or something, if we're having decisions on, projects or funding, and it is from restricted funds, I would always appreciate if you could help point that out so that we don't spend time trying to, question that. And I don't know if you ever heard of this guy, Jack Shu, who used to sit next to me at Sandag.
Oh, yeah, we know
But he
Jack.
used to show me a lot of this data. So anyways, thank you so much.
No, and to your point, you're absolutely right. I mean, there are contaminants that are in Coronado at levels that we see are similar to Barrio Logan. And I know that Jack mentioned having talked with you about those issues, so happy to continue that conversation.
I had just one quick question for you guys, and you brought it up briefly right now about grant funding and stuff, how that is affecting our overall strategic plan, because I know we had, as you mentioned, like an EPA grant that was recently terminated. Is that going to change any of this vision of the strategic planning, the changing in funding and grants?
At this time, like I say, we are looking for alternate funding sources to keep that work going. And certainly funding is going to be one of the largest constraints that we look at as we're looking at how to implement the plan. So we went through a very long process with stakeholders and this, board and our staff and agency partners to develop the themes and develop the strategies that we've presented. But at the end of the day, if there's not resources to do it, then it would have to be, perhaps phased in until a time when there are resources. At this time, we're not proposing any changes as a result, but certainly as we look at specific action plans for the various strategies, that would be a very prominent consideration for us.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? No. Thank you, staff. So I guess that adjourns our meeting for,
Yes, there's no additional items before the board, before the committee.
okay, great. So I'd like to thank everybody for attending the Planning and Policy Committee today. We'll close this meeting and then we'll reconvene for our governing board at 5 p.m. Thank you.